older, some people are younger, some people like to text, some people like to email, some people want you to always call them or use a carrier pigeon. So first of all, just knowing exactly how your buyer or seller wants to communicate is just the first part. I think it's super important to know how your folks just want you to talk to them. I think that's important. And then, so from that point on, obviously you can begin to send them the listings and, you know, go and show houses and things like that. But hold on just a second. My video isn't not seeing anything. So hold on. We'll fix it. I feel like I'm lost in here. Okay. So it's important to know going into the houses, first of all, walking in, I think your negotiation begins, right? So say your buyer comes to you and they're like, we have this beautiful house. We can't wait to see it. I'm so excited. You walk in and you begin to look around. And if it's something that they're actually interested in, that negotiation begins because you're looking in the kitchen to see what kind of appliances they have. Are you going to want to write those in? Is the washer and dryer kind of falling apart? Is that something you would want to have asked to be removed? Or just anything that you might want to write in the offer. Is there an old above ground pool that looks like it's pretty broken that you, if you decide to write an offer on this, would you want to take it out? Things like that, just right off the bat, like little things that seem unimportant, but often by the time you leave the house, you might already forget about some of those things. Does that make sense? Okay, and then, hold on, I'm trying to fix this one more time because, hey, Amy, are you there? All I see is black, but oh well, we can fix it later. Can you all hear me okay? Yeah, okay, thanks, Lucy.
And we can see you too.
You can? Okay, because it's just black for me, but that's fine. I don't need to see myself, it's fine. So, so I think that's just important. I mean, just to begin your negotiations in your mind as you begin to walk through a house that you think is probably a good option, especially these days when a lot of times you're seeing the house one time and often you have to write an offer because you know there's 3 other people that are going to make an offer on it at the same time. So with your client, you just establish that goal and you begin to consider what you might want with that specific property. So I was reading an Inman article, and one of the things that they talked about was just the definition of bargaining, because negotiation is a lot of that is just bargaining, and it is bargaining. The definition of it is a give and take process between 2 or more parties, each with its own aims, needs, and viewpoints, seeking to discover a common ground and reach an agreement to settle a matter of mutual concern or resolve a conflict. That's bargaining. So I think it's hard. It's easy to get frustrated. I know a lot of us have had hard deals lately, and everybody wants what's best for their buyer, best for their seller, and it's stressful. And so to negotiate can be hard, and it can be emotional, it can be frustrating. And so everybody's trying to find the best for their side. Okay, so let's talk about what's next. So your client's looking at all these houses, your client falls in love with a home. They need to move fast because there's a strong chance that it might have multiple offers. How can you help your client come in strong? Anybody want to pitch in? What are some ways that you can already consider coming in strong with an offer?
Maybe not only price, but like days of inspection, clean as far as no closing cost or home warranty or not, those three factors.
Yes, I totally agree. Anybody else?
Call the listing agent and tell them, hey, we're preparing an offer. This is where we're coming from. What can we help to assist our offer? What does the seller want to see in an offer?
That's great. That's awesome, especially for someone brand new in this business. That is so important. Besides, because obviously everyone knows price is important, but a lot of times it's not the most important thing to a seller. What's important to their seller in addition to the price? Like Lucy said, there's a lot of things: inspection time frame, earnest money amount, pre-approval, super important, a good strong pre-approval letter. and I know that you have time to give that pre-approval letter, but I'm a strong believer in having it on hand and sending it with your offer, especially right now. And then there's other things to consider. What are, you could ask, so if you ask a seller, if you have done this before, maybe it's something you want to do. If you ask a seller, what are things that might be important outside of price? What are some things that you guys have heard, maybe that are kind of unconventional or things that are common?
Maybe they need a different period of time to close or to move out of the house. So you can talk to them about that a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just with a real, a strong delayed or early possession agreement that helps. I think somebody else started to say something.
If they already like, I always ask, like, what's their particular situation? Have they already found a house that they're gonna move to? Because if they haven't, then maybe they will be better served with a 60-day closing.
Mm-hmm.
That gives them time to find that house. Or
Yeah.
as delayed possession. I've heard that recently, like people will be better served with a 2-day delayed possession, which always made me nervous, but I've heard it lately. I heard it from a lady in the Villas of Rock Springs who was moving to another house, and the realtor, the agent told me, and I brought buyers in, and he told me she could use delayed possession of 2 days to move to her other house or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know it always makes me nervous too, because it's that whole, like, you're in the house, but it's their stuff, or vice versa. But I do feel like it gives people peace of mind to have that little bit of time in their house to know that it's closed. Similar to what Lucy and I have a cross sale right now that had to deal with. I mean, there's a peace of mind in knowing that you have a little time and you know that the people are going to buy the house. Any other things that you guys have come across or have heard of?
For the repairs, possibly that they don't have to do the repairs, but it could be that, so much money to be able to have your client have the money to do it, because they just don't want to fool with having to do them per se.
Yeah, I really
willing to let you have X amount of money to be able to have it done.
I find that one of the strong ways to negotiate, and somebody else was talking about this the other day, I think it was during the team meeting, isn't to not have, obviously we always want to have an inspection, but one strong negotiating tactic is to say, we're going to have an inspection period, but we won't ask for repairs. Because I think so many times a seller gets so nervous to agree to a certain price and then also think, okay, we might get nickel and dimed for a million repairs, where this is basically, we'll have an inspection and we're either going to walk away or we're going to take it as is. And I found that's helped get an offer accepted in a multiple offer situation, just because it's peace of mind. Another thing is, like Lucy said, a short or a long closing time frame. That makes a big difference. And let's see. Go ahead.
With the we're gonna perform an inspection, but we're not gonna request for any repairs. For me, it's kind of so black and white that I would rather have someone request for some repairs and move through the closing than have the risk of have someone come in and say, I'm not gonna buy, and leave me at the 7th day or at the 10th day. I don't know.
Yeah, and that can be a problem. It's tough because I think some agents will use it as a tactic, like, we're not going to ask for repairs, and then all of a sudden the inspection comes back really bad, and they're like, well, I know we said we weren't going to do repairs, but the sump pump's broken, and that's where you have to be really tricky, because if you come in and say, I'm not going to do it, you really either do have to take it or leave it. But sometimes, like you're saying, the seller will come back and be like, well, listen, we will fix that big roof issue, but that's it, or something like that. But yeah, it is very black and white. It is one less negotiation, and I also think sometimes it comes down to the seller feeling confident in the state of their home. I think that's a lot of it too. Another thing is a nice email to accompany your offer. obviously not breaking any kind of fair housing rules. Like you can't be like, well, my beautiful family of 4 and they're, you know, you just have to be super careful. But basically just like, I look forward to working with you, you know, is a nice way to just kind of begin a good conversation with the other agent. Any questions on that part? No? All right, so I'm gonna flip to this little flyer I found. Okay, so let's see. Next, once you're under contract, your next negotiation is inspections. So say you did a typical inspection period and you're gonna ask for repairs. That's my least favorite part of the entire deal, because some buyers are super savvy with what they can fix and they just don't really need much. They're reasonable. Others aren't and they want everything. And I do think that depends a lot of times on the person and their situation and things like that. But I think part of it begins in the beginning, and you can't make them listen, because I have plenty of buyers that don't listen and they just want what they want, and it's our job to represent their desires. But prepare your client. That's not about being nitpicky. I have plenty of buyers that still are nitpicky and they'll still make me write on there, tighten the toilet, I want 3 GFI outlets or whatever. But at least do your best to prepare them to not ask for every little thing on there, because it's never good. And explain to them it's not about upgrades. And it's also another thing to consider, not to jump around, but if a seller has a home warranty in place already, which a lot of them do, so many times that home warranty can make a lot of the repairs that have been requested. So not every seller has one in place from when they purchased the home, but so many repairs can be done, especially if that warranty is in place and it's beyond 30 days from when it was put in. Does that make sense? Oh, go ahead, Shelley.
So I have a quick question. Since I'm a newer agent too, is a home warranty like an insurance contract in that when the seller leaves, vacates the home, that home warranty is over and done with, or does it remain with the house if you have an active one in place? Does that question make sense?
It does make sense.
Okay.
I can't speak for every home warranty, but I know most, as long as you transfer them at closing and that amount that's owed then kicks in that new year, 2 years, whatever you're paid for. But I believe with most of them, and definitely check per whether it's 210 or First American or whatever you're using, that I don't believe there's a 30-day period. Like typically if you just put one in place, there's a 30-day period before everything, like a listing. Like if you list your home with a warranty, there is a 30-day period before you can use anything, because if not, people would put warranties in place and claim all this stuff right off the bat.
Sure.
But if there's one in place already and then it transfers to the buyer, I don't think there's any kind of period with that. So it's kind of nice, I mean, to have that in place already.
But it can transfer to the buyer? It doesn't stop when the seller leaves?
You have to call and transfer it.
You have to transfer it. Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah. And sometimes they choose a different company too, Shelley. So maybe a 210's in place, but they really like First American. They've used it for years. That would be a different company. But yeah, if a listing has one in place, a lot of times, a lot of those repairs can be taken care of using the warranty if they have one. And that's just something to kind of keep in the back of your mind. Also, when the market isn't as like crazy as it is now, and listings did sit for a longer period of time, it sometimes would behoove you to list it with a warranty, because it wouldn't sell right away. So that 30 days would eat away, and then a house would go under contract and they would have a list of repairs and they would have a warranty in place that then would fix a lot of it for just a trade fee. So there are perks to having those warranties in place, especially in markets that are a little bit slower. All right, so then you've negotiated your repairs. Does anyone have any like stories about inspections that have been just like a nightmare, or wins they want to talk about? Because I think examples are really helpful to learn from. Nobody?
Well, I have exact opposite ends of the spectrum, what you just said. So I have 3 houses under
Okay.
contract right now. One of them, was a relocation. They're working with a relocation company, which has been a super challenge. But my buyers were like, nope, we're going to keep the inspection they had, and we're not asking for repairs. We'll take care of whatever ourselves, because the husband has a background in construction. So that was easy. And then I have another buyer who asked for everything in the son plus its brother. And I kept trying to explain to her, and we went to a class at the office where a lady who works with Brad, and I apologize, I can't remember her name, but she said, set that expectation up front, what this covers. And I tried to do that with this buyer. And she's like what you said, she wasn't having any of it. She wanted, I bet you had 25 things on that list. And yeah, it was not a good situation. So I've had both of them. Yeah.
It is. And you never want to, it's very important that you don't like throw your seller or throw your buyer under the bus. So it's like, you can talk to them all day long about what not to do as far as anything really. I mean, I had a buyer once that wanted to buy a house in Mockingbird, and they were insistent upon offering $250,000 under the asking price. And I was like, oh my gosh. I'm like, that's going to be super expensive. Like, I don't think that's a great idea. But at the end of the day, they really wanted me to give it a whirl, and I gave it a whirl. But same with repairs. But it's hard because even if you disagree with every tiny little thing that they want, you can't go to the other agent and be like, well, my buyer's being really nitpicky. You just have to represent them as best as you can. And at the end of the day, it's their purchase and it's their request. And as long as it's ethical and all that stuff, it's our job to represent what their wishes are. And the worst case scenario, the seller says no, and then you deal with that. Okay, now comes appraisal. Yay, the worst part. That's always scary, especially now, because they're so busy that I think sometimes they're scooping the bottom of the barrel, and there's these appraisers from, Timbuktu are appraising the houses in Jefferson County, and they just don't know. I've had multiple appraisals come in off lately, and it's made it difficult. So let's do like a little fun role-playing kind of thing. So you have a house and it gets appraised. You're so excited. It appraises at 7,000 under, but every other, it's a condo. We're going to add that. It's a condo. And so basically, the square footage is right. It matches the master deed. All the other homes in the complex that are 3 bedrooms are the exact same size. Yours is comparable in finishes, cleanliness, etc. Comes in 7,000 under. What do? You have the listing.
I have no idea what it
appraisal.
What'd you say?
You can ask for another appraisal.
Yeah, you can. Well, actually, you have to ask the other side, the buyer's agent, and they have to ask for that appeal through their lender. So getting that person to do it that's definitely one step. Any other things that you can think of?
I don't know if this one, but I think you can provide comps too.
Yes.
To prove.
And those have to go through the lender to the appraiser as well. But as long as, you can get those to the agent and have them send them over. Most of the time the other agent will be, with you and try and help you. But sometimes they're not. I mean, you have a buyer and it's hard to fight for them to spend $7,000 more. But when it's so obvious because it's a condo and it's apples to apples, that's when your fight does become a joint effort. I've dealt with this lately. I had that's exactly what happened. It came in really low, and we, in our search, realized that every 3-bedroom in this complex called the Fountains, I don't know if anyone sold anything over there, the master deed is actually wrong. So all the 3 bedrooms, the master deed added in the garage on the square footage. So they're claiming all of them were 1,600 square feet. Well, the appraiser came back and was like, these are 1,379. I guarantee it. I double checked it. Well, as we polled, we realized that he was actually right. Like the master deed was off because they added the garage. But how do you fight that? Because at the end of the day, it's still apples to apples because it was all using it against 3-bedroom properties in the same community, but yet he was the only one that caught that. And so he's like, well, this one's smaller. And we're like, no, it's not. And eventually it ended up working out and we figured it out, but it wasn't easy. That's for sure. So, okay. Okay. So then, yeah. And then at the same time, you're also trying to negotiate this appraisal. But you have to keep your timeline in mind because you're also trying to close within a certain period of time. And any kind of changes on an appraisal take a while. They don't typically move very quickly. Any questions on appraisal or any situations you guys want to talk about? It's so funny.
is that basically the only two things you can do is ask for another appraiser from, if you're the list, the buying agent's lender, or to provide comps.
Well, you can do that, and obviously you can just talk to the other side about it and try and figure it out. Especially if it's a smaller amount. A lot of times, everybody will sort of pitch in to make it work between the agents and the buyer and the seller. If people are reasonable, sometimes they'll just get to an agreement. Sometimes the seller will come down, or maybe if the buyer had the seller paying some closing costs, that's something they might forfeit just to kind of help bridge the gap. It's the third negotiation sometimes, and it can be really difficult because you're dealing with a seller who's upset now because they feel strongly about what their home's worth. It's their home, and you get that. But then you have a buyer who's like, well, I was willing to pay that amount, but now if it's not worth that, I don't want to spend this much over. And then, it's tricky. So I think anytime you can negotiate it first is great, but sometimes it's so blatantly off, like the one I had, that both of us felt very confident that this was just a bad appraisal. And so that's when we actually had to really fight it. And we did get it up. We didn't get it all the way to where we were, but we got it up close enough to where we then negotiated again. So no matter what, you're probably going to have some negotiation mixed in there.
Okay.
I hope that helps. And then, okay. Then let's talk about, again, I think another point of negotiation is closing date. That can be really tricky because especially when there's a lot of moving parts as far as like another purchase or out of state or in state, or so many times people are moving because it's a difficult life experience. So either they're getting divorced or they're getting married, or they're moving out of state. And it's always something that is more stressful than just the move itself. Typically that adds like a whole nother layer of concern. So just work together again, just to try and make that work. And that's not always easy because you have a lot of like feelings involved, but somehow at the end of the day, it tends to work out. And so that's another piece that can be really, really tough. So at the end of the day, all of this comes down to communication with your seller, with the lender, with the other agent, with everybody. And I think that's just our business, don't you guys? I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's just, that's what we're in, like dealing with people. And even sometimes when there's nothing to say, like I have a new construction in Taylorsville and there's not much to say, except I go out there and I'll take pictures and I'll send them to them, or I'll just say, hey, I talked to the builder, flooring went in, or hey, there's really not much to say today. I did check in, but they're just still working on the stuff that's, we can't really see much of. But people just want to know that you're thinking of them and you're kind of have their best interest at heart. All right. Another piece. Okay. Any questions? Anybody want to chime in? I always hate being the one talking the whole time. No? Okay. Let's talk about emotions, because this can be a very emotional business. Not business, I guess. It can be, I guess, but it just can be emotional, and it's hard because it's our job to keep the emotions out of it. But I'm not good at that because I like wear my heart on my sleeve and my feelings hurt. And so, I find the hardest thing to do is like, I try to see both sides, but then you have to have your buyer's best interest at heart or your seller's best interest at heart. But then if you go back to that buyer or that seller and say, well, put yourself in their shoes, oftentimes they can easily come back to you and be like, well, whose side are you on? But yet it's also our job to walk that fine line between, well, if, telling them, well, if you were the one trying to move now, or if you were the one coming cross country, like walk that fine line between, making sure that they know you have their best interest at heart, but at the same time also kind of showing them what it's like to be on the other side, because it's difficult. It's very difficult. Any questions?
I do have a question.
Sure. Oh, hi there.
Hi, I'm still here. So how, maybe this is kind of personal, but how much do you keep your client? Obviously, we keep our clients very informed, but like you said, like in the appraisal part that you're like trying to negotiate, do you bring your client to every single, like you're trying to come up with another realtor to an agreement, let's put it that way. And sometimes we just try to do it and, like, hey, can we just work something out? Do we invite our clients to all of these conversations, or how do you personally do it, Kelly? Like, in other words, do they know all the ugly truth that you're going through and the background? That's kind of my question.
That's like a really good question. And honestly, I think it depends on the scenario and like the stress and the mental state of your client. I do think that they always need to be abreast of what's happening, but sometimes you'll get some information, but you don't really have all the back information. So sometimes it takes a minute or 30 minutes to kind of figure enough out to where when you do go to your client, you have the full story, right? So that can be, hold on, wait a minute. I need to talk to this other agent, or I need to call and see why this is the way that it is. I need to look something up on my computer and realize, okay, yes. Okay, so for instance, with the appraisal that didn't come in for me, I went ahead and like reran the comps myself so that I refreshed my memory and had that to bring to the table when I talk to them again. And so I do try and keep, I think it's important to keep the client in the know because it's what they're buying, but I also feel like it's important to come to the conversation prepared. Does that help?
Okay. Yes, thank you. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, let's see. This is actually, it's kind of jumping around a little bit, but I read this article for NMAM when I was preparing for this class, and it was one of the strategies that they talked about in negotiating. And I think really this has to do with a lot of pieces of it. And it's a word that I keep hearing. Have you guys heard anyone refer to negotiations and nibbling? I haven't either, but it's popping up in a lot of articles. So I thought I'd read you guys what they said. I don't really know anything about it besides this, but I thought I'd put a bug in your ear because it's something that I've seen in a few different articles. But they use the definition as a strategy that buyers, hold on, I think I just chimed and probably talked over myself. A strategy that buyers use to obtain the majority of what they're asking for to make the seller feel cheap. As the name explains, the buyer nibbles a bite here and a bite there, slowly getting everything they desire from the seller. So to me, at first, it seemed like a negative thing because I feel like with a listing, you have to be careful of that happening. But then when you think about it on a buyer side, I can see how it could almost like kind of wear them down. What are your all's thoughts on that in general? This is new to me. I've never heard that term.
Doesn't sound very win-win.
I agree. Yeah, it does not. It sounds yuck, doesn't it?
It sounds annoying.
Yes.
I don't.
Well, and a lot of times there's not a whole lot of time to work on people. I mean, you've got a very specific set amount of time. So I would be curious if there were examples like, how did that happen and what did it look like? You know what I mean? Because it sounds like they've got all the time in the world to, work on the sellers, and that's not, of course, not true.
Yeah, it's interesting. So with the same article, I have to send it to you all or figure out a way to get Amy to send it, but it was 4 different types of negotiation. I should have printed the whole thing. But do you guys ever watch $1 Million Listing, Los Angeles or New York or whatever? It's so off what we do here, but Josh Flagg's my favorite. I think he's so funny. And he was one of the 4. He mentioned always give them an easy out was his. It was like top 4 negotiating tips of like big agents. And his was, I thought it was interesting. I wish I would have printed it, but his was like to kind of give them an easy out. So for instance, say they're wanting washer and dryer. He might say, well, I know your seller probably has like family members to donate it to, but if they're willing, we would really love to have the washer and dryer. And he said that giving them an easy way out was something that works for him all the time. And that kind of threw me for a loop too. What do you all think about that? It doesn't seem super beneficial at all, does it?
I think it makes you sound compassionate, but
Yes.
it doesn't sound like, if you give them an easy out, I would think they would take the easy out.
Yeah, it's like kids. It reminds me of kids. Like you go into your kids, well, I know you really don't want to do your homework, but it would really benefit you if you would do that math. No, it's not going to go over. But you know, it does. It does make you sound compassionate and definitely not pushy. But
if you think about it, okay, I'm telling you, or I'm saying to you, I'm compassionate as, well, I'm sure you want to give it to a relative, but you know, if you just want to leave it here, which is convenient for you, is basically what I'm saying. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Then no problem. You know, you just leave it, and then we're being kind-hearted that you were just leaving it there.
yeah. It's like the
So,
ground pool
I can
that's
see it.
falling apart. We'll just, you know, we'll just leave it for you. No.
That's right. Exactly. So I can see what Josh is talking about.
Yes. Okay, so then another piece of info I pulled was actually straight from the Ignite, the 3 Ps approach, and I just thought we'd kind of go through that real quick. They say that negotiation is a skill that can be learned and perfected with experience. The best practice for negotiating and bringing the buyer and seller together is the 3 Ps approach of prepare, present, and position. So it's to prepare, obviously, is to build the confidence. So you have to know your goal. What are you heading toward? You want this house, you want it for a certain price, etc. Know your client. Make sure you understand their full goals. Think ahead. And that's, again, the thinking ahead is a lot how we talked about too, is calling ahead and seeing what maybe is beneficial to the seller. Set clear expectations. That's something that's a lot of times just part of your buyer consult, I think, off the bat, or your listing consult, depending, because negotiation obviously isn't just with buyers. Be informed, obey the laws, and know the documents inside and out. Overall, I think no matter what we do, you can have an almost perfect transaction, and it just never is. There's always going to be some kind of hiccup that happens, or you know, a little something that comes along, and just realizing that we're not perfect, and also realizing that you know, just working through it. I mean, it's like any other relationship in life. It's just the communication and the grace and the kindness. Because I remember one of the worst situations I had. This seller was just horrible. It started off interesting because I was in the listing appointment, and they were this elderly couple, and she says, well, I'm sitting at the kitchen table, and she said, so, well, the other day we had a snake in the house, and I'm terrified of snakes. I'm like, oh, you did, it's great. And she said, yeah, it was about a 5-footer, and it was right over there. And she points to the painting behind my head. And I'm thinking, you're kidding me. Like, no. She's like, yeah, we get them in the house. And I'm like, what? So it started off as an odd thing to begin with, but then the husband just increasingly got really, really mean, and like would scream. And well, what I didn't know, and I found out later, is that he had a brain tumor that was altering his personality a lot, and ultimately he passed away. But that transaction for me was a big game changer, because it reminded me that, like, no matter what, people are dealing with stuff, and not everyone handles that stress the same, or the life change the same, and you kind of just don't know. So it's easy to get frustrated. And I'm good at getting frustrated too, but I do try and remind myself of that guy, because I would have just thought he was just like a jerk, but he wasn't. I mean, he couldn't control the hormones and everything that was going on. So it's just something I try and remind myself of. So any questions? No? Okay. So next, I thought it'd be sort of fun to do like a little bit of role play. So I'm just gonna give you guys a scenario, and I'm just gonna randomly pick 2 of you all to like hash it out as if you're the buyer's agent, listing agent. Okay. So Jenny, you've been really quiet, so I'm calling on you.
Okay.
Beth, are you off the phone? Okay, I'm calling on you. Okay.
Yeah. I was gonna say, the reason I'm quiet is because I'm only a couple weeks into this, so
Okay.
I haven't had a buyer, I haven't had a seller, so
Okay.
you know what I mean?
Would you rather not role play? Would you rather just listen and let?
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind role playing, but I don't know how much I can give because I've never had these conversations for real.
Okay, well, let's just thrust you into it because no matter what, that's how it is in the business. Like your first transaction, you're going to have something to figure out. So we're still gonna use you. Okay, so you, Beth, are going to be the buyer's agent, and Jenny, you're going to be the listing agent. Okay.
Yep.
So this was one of my first transactions in real estate years ago, and of course, it was a really good friend of mine. So I'm going to give you the scenario and see what you think. So reverse a little bit. It's about 2011. Okay. So the market was not what it is today. It was slow and it was tough. Okay. So longtime friend of mine and her husband moving back to Kentucky. They sell their house in Houston, Texas. It closes. Everything is great. 2 full trucks full of stuff come on the way from Houston here. Everything had gone smooth. We were ready to close. And they're en route from Texas here. Bank of America alerts them that they made a clerical mistake on their end, and they're sorry that they can't give them the loan. That's it. It was horrible. And I mean, we had a closing date and everything. So what do you do? What do you do? So again, Jenny, you're the listing agent, right? Beth, you're the buyer's agent. So Beth, you get the call from your frantic people saying, we can't close on the house. All our stuff's in a truck. The kids are in the car. We have nowhere to go. Kelly or Beth, what do we do?
Boy, this is tough not having done all this. Could you suggest that they look at to see what the loan could be for? Obviously, it's not going to be for the amount that they intended it to be, which would cover the cost of purchasing their new home. Is there an option to go to a different lender? Is there the possibility of having the seller at this point pay for some additional items during closing?
Those are all awesome questions. So you're thinking,
I mean, I know I'm kind of asking it as a question, but I mean, I wouldn't be asking them as a question. I'm asking you guys as a question.
no, it's good. Okay, so I'm going to time you out, Beth, and see if anyone else wants to chime in as far as what she said. You can add in or you can answer her question.
Well, I'm thinking, because something similar happened to me, so I'm thinking like if it's a vacant home, is there a possibility that they take like an early possession and try to just work the loan in another way? And are the sellers willing to, if they're really, really, depends on the situation. In my case, my sellers didn't mind and it worked out, but that will be like, is there a possibility if it's a vacant home? Can you just take early possession and pay the mortgage in the meantime and work with another lender?
That
is not Bank of America.
That's a great option. Patty, were you going to say something too?
Yeah, because I wanted to, I guess specifically, I'm sorry on this because I got to say about specifically what was wrong with the loan. Was it just a little blip or was it a major blip?
It was a major blip, like, sorry, thanks, but no thanks. We can't lend you money. And it was a big bank. It was Bank of America, so there wasn't much we could do. So that loan was done. I couldn't do anything with them. Yeah, so that's a piece of it, Beth, too. Is like you mentioned, can you call and see how much, whatever. They were just like, sorry, not sorry. And it's crazy because it was the loan that they had on their other house that had just closed. I mean, not the loan, the lender that they had on their old house that they just closed on, and they were good for it. It was very strange. But no.
Well, I was going to say, I would check with some of my smaller, like credit union, whatever loan versus the larger banks, because the banks are much harder, to see if I have somebody in my network that could, one, we could get started immediately, and do that. Secondly, about getting a hold of my listing agent to be able to, hey, can we renegotiate the closing date? I don't know how it is with your clients, if by extent they have any wiggle room for extension, to see if they have, because they may. It might be, I had someone who was building a house. They ended up that they really needed more time. The sellers needed more time. So if that happened to me, it would have been great. It works out for both of us, and we can extend that time for you to stay, and I can put mine in temporary housing while yours continue with yours while we get this straightened out while they're here.
Yeah, that's a good point. That is. Okay, so now I guess, Jenny, you get the call from the frantic buyer's agent, and they're telling you this. What do you do?
Well, it would help if it was 2011 and the market was a lot slower. I think initially it'd be trying to, number one, like between the two of us, two agents, who do we know as a lender that we can call and get things rolling immediately? Because as a seller's agent, I would want to know that we could get a loan.
Mhm.
So I think that would be the first thing before we would ever agree to early possession or anything like that is this going to work?
Mhm.
And so I think that would be my first go-to is like, all right, I know I've got lenders that I use. You probably have lenders you use, Beth, who, let's make some calls and see what we can get going and what's this going to look like. Because I would guess that my sellers probably are waiting on the close of this to move into something too. So it's that little bit of that ripple effect.
Yeah.
And time is of the essence.
Exactly. It's so stressful. And at the same time, you know that even if you bring in your lender that you trust and love, it's not happening very quickly. So they have 2 trucks full of stuff that's very expensive to load and unload one truck, much less 2. So I'll tell you what happened. And we got very, very lucky. And this to me is a testament to having really good people to work with as far as like your lenders and things like that. I was able to call a lender that I'd used that's local. He got them pre-approved, and we closed it in 2 weeks. And that sounds like 2 weeks, that's a long time. Not at all. Not in 2011. Not when they literally were in tears because they didn't know where they were going. It did cost them almost $10,000 because of the hotel stays, the moving trucks, the unloading, the reloading. But at the end of the day, they were in a home. We didn't do the rental of the home. I forget, I don't remember why. It's been a long time. But it did work out, and thankfully they were willing to just hang in there. And thankfully I had a good listing agent and sellers that were just really kind about it. But it just took a lot of work. And also there was ways to kind of speed it up as far as like Bank of America allowed the new lender to use that appraisal. I don't know if that happens anymore or not, but it helped because it saved us a lot of time. We were already through inspections. So it was basically like we had to start over at the time of appraisal on, which, is like 10 to 14 days. And they were able to get into the house and they lived happily ever after. Actually, no, they didn't. That house burned to the ground, but they're fine now. But it was like nightmare after nightmare. It was I don't know if anyone lives near Glen Oaks, but it was the house that burned down. Do you, Lucy? Like 4 or 5 years ago, back on, I feel like it was like Worthington. She was the sorority sister of mine. It literally burned to the ground and they rebuilt, but it was that house. It's like the worst thing
In the
that
back
happened.
of the neighborhood. Yeah.
What'd you say? You cut out for a sec.
In the back of the neighborhood, in the
Yeah.
link.
Yeah. And newer, it was like a Dominion section or something like that. It was a beautiful house. And thankfully everybody got out and they were fine, but it burned to the ground in minutes. Like she ran down the street to get her kids from someone else. And like, it was so sad. But okay. All right, let's talk about another fun part because I'm the worst at this. And so I'd love to get your opinion. You can help me with it. I'm the worst at caving with my commission when things get difficult. Does anyone else have this issue, or do they? I'm terrible at it because I'm like, a bird in the hand's worth 2 in the bush. Like I'd rather help salvage something, but my husband's always like, Kelly, are you serious? Like you're doing it again. But I just feel like that's sometimes you have to step in. Has anyone had situations that they'd want to share? Because especially if you're new in the business, it's something that comes up a lot. Anybody?
All
Lucy?
the time.
I
I think
know.
all my transactions lately have been like that because I'm trying to save it. And at one point, I'm like, I have to give them something. So I do actually, I'm right now in a situation that I need to back up of an offer. And I'm like, I just pay for it. And I just called somebody before this meeting and they were like, you can't do that. It's not your fault. But I'm like, just super like, I do that. That's one of my mistakes too. Like, but you know, when I received the paid, I'm like, oh my gosh, I worked so hard and it was not fair with me. So
Do you
maybe
do
this
it
is
when
not,
you think, do you do it when you think it's going to fall apart, or do you do it to help smooth it over and so they know you're in it with them? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, where do you find like your motivation is, or do you feel like I'm making so much money, like I need to help? Where does the give come from?
the couple, I mean, I've been like one time I did it just to help my seller. Like I had it he made it very clear, and I knew his situation, and he made it very clear that he didn't have a lot of money for repairs. So when they came with the repairs, it was like they asked for a lot, and we just kind of tried to negotiate it, and they were like gonna back out. So in order for me just to save the sale, I said, here, I can help us maybe just drop a little bit of my commission. And to be honest with you, I feel great, but I know that is not a smart business idea. It was that was a friend of mine, and it was a young couple with a kid, you know, and so I get sucked into their stories a lot. So, but I needed to save the deal. So we didn't have to go, we were at the end of, you know, we were already negotiating repairs. So I didn't want to start all over for him.
You know, you say bad business, and I know I feel that way sometimes too, Alex. Like, why do I give in? Like, I don't want to be a doormat, you know? But at the same time, I do sometimes, if it does help get the deal done, I do feel like sometimes there are times that it's okay. I know that I do it too often, and so it's something I personally need to work on, being a little bit stronger, but I've been taking advantage with it. And so your reasoning sounds good. I mean, especially with repairs. But yeah, it just feels kind of bad at the end of the day, especially, you know, at closing, if they walk away with like a ton of money and you're like, but I think there's a little bit of guilt some of us feel right now because the houses sell super fast, you know, especially like with the listing, you listed it for a day and it's already under contract. But at the end of the day, this is our job. This is our livelihood, you know. And does anybody else have times they've given in commission? You, Lucy?
I've learned here at KW not to give in my commission. Like before, I used to do it all the time and I wasn't cautious. And I will give in to smooth a transaction, like to smooth it with the other agent. I will say, yeah, let's do this together, and I will do it in, you know, to get along to the closing table. That's my motivation. But I think, I mean, people are buying a $250,000 house or a $500,000 house, and I have to give like $2,000 or $3,000 or $500 out of my money, but they're buying a, you know, they're making a big commitment like this. And I also think it like, this is 500 or 2,000 that I'm not bringing to my home, to my girls, that I'm, you know, that I'm not bringing to my family, that we could have made a wonderful vacation out of, and I'm instead giving it to another person. So I think of it like that, like and I've learned it while I'm in Keller Williams. So, I mean, not to be
How have you gotten tougher about it? I'd love to hear how you've kind of worked to make that something that you do less of, because I could learn that. I could learn that from you, because that's something that I do it too much. I know that. I'm supposed to be teaching this class, but you know, if you could share your info, that'd be great.
No, I remember when I was in Bold and I was sitting next to Todd Paxton from Indiana.
Uh-huh.
And he said, when I'm doing my listing presentation, and he says, if they ask, would you negotiate your commission? And he said, I just say, ha ha ha, no. Do you have any other questions? That's it.
Oh my gosh.
Like that. Like, no. Do you have any other questions? Like, move on. Like, it's that serious. Like, you wouldn't even consider it. And I totally adopted that, and I've never had an issue with it. And when you
So you do
that-
it, you laugh.
and when you do that exercise about, you have 3 bills and here's what I received, and one's for tax money and one's for my broker and one's for my family, like that's for my family. I mean, I don't take my girls to, I don't know, to a vacation if I'm donating that to my transaction or to my buyers or my sellers. So I always think in terms of my girls, because that's my big why. So that helps. But if it's to smooth a transaction, I can do it, you know.
That's good. I like that. I like that. I always forget that 3 points, but that's a good one. It's tough. And I think it'll start to make you like frustrated, because I know years ago I had a long time friend of mine. She was a single girl. She had watched my kids for years. Wanted specifically a condo in an area that never went on the market. And I knew I had a friend that was about to list hers, but I knew financially it was just tough for that girl. And so I called her and I said, hey, I know you talked about selling your condo. I have a buyer. Would you be willing to just do a for sale by owner on that side and let my buyer see it? Well, of course she said yes. And my buyer loved that property and we negotiated price. Well, the girl had only lived there for a little bit more than a year, so she didn't have a lot of equity in there. And she came to me and said, Cal, you know, I can do this deal, but I can't pay commission on either side. And I was like, oh gosh, because I had the buyer, I forfeited any side on the listing side to let her be by owner, because obviously it wasn't listed. And basically at the end of the day, she's like, I can afford to pay you $1,000 total. Well, I had to think about my buyer. Her best interest was to live in this community where there isn't anywhere else there wasn't any other listing. So I went ahead and agreed to the deal. Well, at the closing table, you know, I get this $1,000 check, and it was a really difficult transaction. It was just emotional. It wasn't hard, but the people were going through a lot. And at the end, she walked away with tons of money. Like her net proceeds were so much. And I remember thinking like, wait a minute. And it kind of put like a little bit of a on the friendship, because I was like, wow, I thought you know, and at the end of the day, I should have just held firm to no, I brought this buyer to you, and I didn't. And that was a learning curve for me, because it's tough. It's tough when friends and family. Yeah, Beth.
I just had a question. Sure. So, you know, when they're telling you up front, like in the one situation that Alexandra had, where they're saying that they can't afford to pay for the repairs or whatever it is, but knowing that they're going to be closing their house, and generally they're going to have some equity in there where they're going to, you know, get money back. Why is it a situation? I mean, can't they put it on a credit card and then when they close, they can just pay it off? I mean, I'm not sure where, you know what I mean? When they just say, I can't afford it, knowing that when they sell their house, they're going to have a profit on it, or hope if that were the case.
Right, if that were the case. And a lot of times it's not, unfortunately. But yeah, I mean, I think that the conversation has to be had up front in the listing appointment, telling them what to expect. And repairs are one of those things to expect. So at the end of the day, when they're looking at the offers that they're getting, they are thinking in the back of their mind that they're going to have some expenses on repairs. That being said, you can't always prepare your seller for a roof they think is great that actually then ends up to be a $5,000 repair. The thing with repairs, Beth, is that we are supposed to provide paid invoices and receipts for any repairs made that were paid to an outside party, because liens transfer with the property, not with the person, right? So if you have like 4 painters and 2 HVAC guys and a plumber that did work on the house, and then they don't get paid, it can end up being an issue for your buyer. So if it's something that maybe can't be paid with a credit card, like a painter that maybe just takes checks, or, I mean, there's people like that around that do it on the side.
Sure.
it's tough to have something to provide.
Mm.
So does someone raise their hand? I feel like I saw a hand go up.
I don't know.
But yeah, I'm with you. I mean, sometimes you would think it would be something that if they do use credit, they could go ahead and take care of. And also upfront, just kind of being like, listen, if you're selling, there's things you have to know are going to be coming up that are going to cost some money. It's not cheap to sell your house.
Okay.
You know, a lot of people don't have cash. They just have equity, you know?
Right. That's true.
So another way to negotiate them often can be just, because obviously we can't give checks at closing anymore. It used to be that we could, and it was great. You know, it was like, here's $500 in lieu of repairs. We can't now. So ways to do that is just maybe negotiating instead of repairs. You know, we don't have the money. Instead of repairs, we're going to pay $2,000 of the buyer's closing cost, because that comes out of their net proceeds at closing. So there's workarounds with it for sure. Or you also could do your listing as an as-is listing where we aren't doing repairs. You can inspect it, but we can't do it. We can't afford them. And I've done a few listings like that, especially if maybe the listing family or couple or wife or whatever is elderly, and you just know that it's going to be too much for her to have to deal with all that kind of stuff. I have a widow right now that it would just better for her not to have to mess with it. So thinking of their best interest and having that conversation with them up front is super helpful. Oh, your cat's so cute. Any questions? Oh, I think you're muted, Lucy.
I didn't know that was the reason to ask for the invoices.
Oh, you cut out. I'm sorry. Can you say it one more time?
I didn't know that was the reason to ask for the invoices.
I know. I actually learned that not that long ago too. I had a cross sale in Lake Forest, and the agent was great. And she kept asking me, I would send her, we did this, here's shows that we had it done, et cetera, et cetera. And she'd say, well, they aren't marked paid. I'm like, well, they were paid. She's like, I need them showing that they're paid. And that was why. Because I guess if like a roofer comes out, hey, that's the house, you know, it's transferring with the house. So it makes sense to me. And it's something that I've now made part of my bag of tricks that I have to do for my buyer, you know. And a lot of times there isn't a worker. It's the person did it themselves at home, and that's fine. You can't have an invoice, but if it's actually work that's been paid, having it invoiced, marked paid is something that I'm going to do from here on out.
So it's either an invoice marked paid or proof of payment, I'm guessing?
Yeah. So I know there was one that house, it was a painter that kind of did it on the side, and he just provided the cleared check from his bank account written to Tom Powers Painting or whatever. It's just another way to protect your buyer, I guess, and seller. Beth?
I was going to say, from the protection standpoint, I would think, especially if you wrote in there that the repairs need to be done by a professional plumber or whatever, that you actually have an invoice where they didn't just do it themselves.
Yeah, for sure. And sometimes things aren't necessary to have some, licensed qualified person do. I mean, putting up a fence board or something, like, anyone can do that. But electrical and things like that can be a big issue, I think, are super important.
HVAC.
Yeah, HVAC, yeah, for sure. And oftentimes plumbing, because plumbing's not done right. It can be even worse. So yeah, that's something that I actually think, I want to double check the wording, and it would have been good for me to do before this class to make sure that on the repair request response, that's written in there, that it's actually paid invoices provided. Because if it's not, it's something I'm going to start doing from here on out, asking for those to be provided, marked paid. All right, so I like to do a little fun thing, because we're nearing an hour and a half, but so let's do like fabulous versus scandalous. Okay, it's gonna be kind of fun. I'd love to hear some stories, whether they're yours or not. Maybe it's something you've heard or something you just want to share. Times when there was like a really big negotiation win, and that's like a fabulous, and then a scandalous. I mean, keep your client's confidentiality to yourself, obviously, but and I don't want to bash any other agents, so like no names, but example of negotiation, like terrible losses or scandals. Like, let's kind of do scandalous versus fabulous and share some stories. I'm hoping they're all fabulous.
Okay, so so many of the things that you've talked about today. So being an agent for a year, I think I've hit every single one of them that you've talked about today. So currently, one of the houses I have under contract, it was as a USDA loan, and the lender didn't do the calculation right. And then we were getting ready to get the clear to close, and the loan fell apart because they no longer qualified then. So we are currently in the middle of trying to get it renegotiated into an FHA loan, and with gift money, and it is every day it is a new can of worms. And the lender were friends with my buyers, so it's been extremely contentious and aggravating, and so that's been pretty scandalous. I was thinking they were going to close last week, and it's pretty scandalous. So
I'm so sorry.
yeah, it's I keep looking at it like, wow, what a great learning experience, because that's the only way I can look at it at this point. It's been pretty crazy. So
You made me think of something, another negotiation
Yeah.
point. You mentioned the USDA loan, which I use a lot of just because of farms and things like that. But that is another interesting thing to consider when you're working with your buyers. It has nothing to do, I guess it really doesn't have anything to do with negotiation much, but sometimes your buyer just doesn't have a lot of cash. And so they're trying to find homes that fit their budget and da-da-da-da. But if you find a house that's a little farther out than maybe they want to live and it qualifies, you can search USDA by the address. Those are 100% loans. And you can find a nice house, because typically a lot of those on the outskirts of the counties, you know, like your Shelby County or whatever, Spencer County, those, you can find a nice house and you get a little bit more bang for your buck. And also those are 100% down or 100% loans. So keep that in mind, especially new agents, when you have buyers that just don't have a lot of cash. Those loans take a little bit longer to close, but they are a good trick to have in your pocket for buyers that are just starting out and don't have a lot of money. Okay, any other fabulous or scandalous?
Okay, well, I have a kind of scandalous / fabulous story together. I met somebody who shall remain nameless, but she is a real estate agent, but not for Keller Williams, completely not even near here. Anyway, and so she and her husband are starting to try to get into the flipping business, and God love her. They hired a person to do tile work, and they thought they had researched really well, and they had looked at his work online, and the work was great, and this and that, and unfortunately they gave him money up front, and he did come to start doing the work, and it is like a kindergartner is doing it. It is so bad. And so they literally had to get another person to come out, and the person is like, I can't even like save this. It is so bad. And you have to tear it all out and redo it. Well, she said, if you look at the pictures of this guy's work online, they're wonderful. And now she's beginning to wonder, does he like take somebody else's pictures to put online? So buyer beware of seeing somebody's work online that may not be their work.
That is a really good point.
I know. And so fabulous is that when I was selling my first only house was when I asked for repair requests. The person, thank goodness that the other agent I worked for, I happened to know, just coincidence, and he used the people who he used, the plumber, the electrician. Because you don't know, they just happen to be people who I knew, and so it was like, thank goodness that he used people that I would have been recommending. So it was kind of a win-win situation that ended up being fabulous, that I could then go to my client and say, yes, these are wonderful recommendations that that they're using, and all the receipts and everything else, that ended up being a fabulous situation.
That's good, especially right now, because all these vendors are so busy that it's so hard to get anyone to do work at all. Well, you had a good person. That's great. Anyone else have scandalous or fabulous?
I had I had a scandalous 46-point request for repairs.
Was that mine?
No.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
46 points, and it included maybe like switch light bulbs or something like that.
Ooh.
An agent from another office. He's a prince though, but he brought me this request for repairs, but we turned it around into a fabulous, because I said to my sellers, I mean, at least he's not requesting like to change a roof or to change an AC so we can tackle a bunch of this, probably half of the list for like $300. So let's check them off. And so we responded and they accepted, and it turned out being not so expensive, but it was absolute. When I received that thing, 46 we counted, I was, oh my God.
Oh my gosh. Well, yeah, sometimes you're right. Those are actually easier because you can just get like a handyman that does it all and be like, can you do this in 2 days?
Exactly.
I'm with you. Like sometimes it's, oh my gosh. Well, I'm glad it worked out. I bet you were like, when you when you saw it. Oh, anybody else?
Okay, so I have one that it ended up being fabulous in the end, but it was dealing with on the loan it was a grandmother, mother, and a daughter, and they had a very unique relationship amongst three. So halfway through, they decide they don't want the grandma on, and their grandma doesn't want to be on the loan. So we had to, of course, let them know that we were switching. We had to let the other side know. I had the buyers, we had to let the sellers know we were switching the names on it because it was taking longer, and we get all it worked out. Well, then it gets to the end and they can't get the loan without the grandma on there. So, I mean, like it was communication, I guess, is like the huge part of this, because the other agent wasn't anybody in our office, but we closed on it Friday. But I mean, like literally she and I just had to continue going back and forth. And, you know, luckily she was just like so good with working with her seller and getting them to understand, like, we're trying to make this happen and all that. But it was really, we had to get an extension on closing twice. And I thought we were going to lose it. And I had said that, I mean, it was crazy, but it closed. So it ended up being fabulous. But kind of back to you, what you were saying before, is just the communication. Like you just have to.
Did you feel so stressed though? Like the stress on your shoulders?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh,
Any closing was stressful. I mean, because all three of them were sitting there and we're sitting in the middle of going around, and the grandmother's like, where's the paper for me to sign to be off in 6 months? And the granddaughter just looks up and says, that means we have to refinance, and unless you're paying for that, I don't have the money to pay for that. The closing attorney, like, we're eye to eye. And I was like, okay, ladies, we've already talked about this. And if you would have closed on this, we need to keep going. And, you know, the lender spoke to you about what you needed to do to come off the loan. So I still didn't know in the middle of it if it was going to happen, but it did.
I'm so glad it closed. That sounds terrible. Terrible. Ugh. Anybody else?
I have one that I thought that I did the greatest job, and then I'm still in the middle of it, but talking about negotiations, like my buyers really love this house, and I was trying to go by the book and get in. So I talked with an agent, and she's like, yes, we do have an offer. So I'm asking all the right questions, and I'm super proud of myself, like, okay, good. And she actually gave me more information that I was expecting. So I came with this strong offer, and she withdrew the previous offer and let us and accept our offer, which was pretty awesome. So I'm calling my buyers like, look at this. I mean, we won, and one especially in the price range that this house is today. I was like, oh, I cannot believe it. This house has been in the market just for today, and they already have like tons of showings and all this thing. And the next day my buyers are like, I don't want the house. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I just did all the right thing here. Like, and the agent is not happy with the situation right now. So, and I can understand that, but, once again, I came from, let's as agents try to communicate and help each other, because this is not good for me. So I think that I'm learning in this transaction also that I have to be really business minded all the time. And the reason I'm saying that is because I came from I don't want to hold your listing anymore, and we just signed it yesterday. I mean, we've been in a contract for a day. I know it's a weekend. I know you can sell this tomorrow. So to be honest with you, they want to make an addition and they can afford it. So I came with the truth instead of going as a business. I shouldn't, and that's the answer that I got from a couple of people once I tried to research it. Like, what is my out and here? Obviously, my out is go to inspections and do it the right way. But I came as I don't want to hold your listing. Well, I learned my lesson that not everybody is, think that way. So at this point, she's like, well, I'm going to hold your good faith deposit. And I was trying to explain to this, to an agent, like $500 for you, maybe it's not a lot. And maybe for me, well, it will be a hit. But for these people, it's a lot of money. So can we just do something for them? And she's staying on her ground. Like, if you do something else, you're falsificating information at this point. So, like I said, I'm like, why? I mean, I can go to inspections and they can just, but like what I'm saying is I came to an agent to find a solution, being thoughtful about her and not my clients, I think. And
You mean you're saying that they, like people that you spoke to, were telling you that you should have went ahead and had inspections and bailed out then? Because
Yes.
in your mind, you're spending the buyer's money on the inspection. So it's like, I would think from a listing standpoint, if you went immediately to her and said, basically, like, my buyers got cold feet, they changed their mind, she would have time to go back to all those other offers that came at her with you and just pick up one of those right off the bat, and that would have her best interest at heart.
Exactly. And that's exactly what it's exactly what I thought, because I know she would draw an offer, and maybe it was a good offer because it was overpriced too, over the listing price. So that's exactly what I called and said, here, I just want to make sure you don't just call these people. And I was, like I said, what I learned is that I was thinking for her and, agent to agent kind of thing, but her back to me was, this is, we're under contract, and yes, you can back out. And actually, she declined my termination yesterday. She said no, because in the termination form, I just put like, we haven't even sent you the money yet. I mean, I don't even have the check yet. And she declined it because of that. So
it seems like wasted time that she could
yes,
contract.
but
I understand her being frustrated just because obviously, she lost out on other buyers for this buyer, but you didn't know they were going to bail,
No, and like I said, I think that because it happened to me before with Keller Williams agents and with agents from another office, where I have to terminate a contract, and I told this person, I know it's a right way to do it in real estate world, like just wait and see what your lender has to say, or go to inspections and spend $300 and just do it the right way, in the past, it happened to me in both sides, and we both worked things out just to get the listing out and let somebody else walk into it,
Yeah.
But like I said, I mean, I learned that not everybody will work in their best interest for what I don't know, and I don't want to call what this person, I understand maybe she's very tough and this person is very business oriented. That's what I'm saying. And she wants to do things by the book. And I think that maybe, I'm sure it's the right way to do it, business. I'm not questioning her motives. I'm just saying I should have never come from my personal, you know what I mean? I don't know.
You can control how, I mean, it's how she reacted. It's not what you did. You had the buyer and you were telling her at the second day they went out, and she told you, let's wait until inspection so they can go out?
No, she didn't tell me that. She just said, okay, you can get out of but I'm gonna hold the good faith money. But, and I said, well, I know, I understand, can we just work something out? But no, I call couple people just to ask, like, what is the best way? I know I can go to inspections.
Mhm.
And they were like, well, I think that that's what the way that legally you can get out of contract without losing your good faith. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but it would seem like for the best interest of her seller would not to be drag it out unless
Exactly.
she has a backup offer in place, and then she's not concerned, because this is an example of why backup offers are so great right now, because people are having to act so quickly on a property because they sell so fast that so many people are getting cold feet, and it's
Mhm.
it's like you don't have time to even really think it out before you have to just jump on it.
Yeah.
That's a tough one, Alex. Have you talked to Brad?
No, actually, I was here and I'm going to call him afterwards, but I'm sure, I mean, I'm not sure, but I know Brad is also very which I respect that, I mean, we have to follow the contract and this is what the contract says. So,
Yeah, that's
Mhm.
tough.
But like,
Any other scandalous or fabulouses? No? All right, let me look at our time. Okay, well, we're nearing 11, so I'll leave you with one. It's not mine, actually. It's just kind of an interesting, fun one. Oh, she's so cute. So my mother-in-law was a broker in South Florida, in like Miami for years, over like 300 agents. And early on in her career, she listed a property for someone she knew that had a python. And when I say python, like a huge snake. Do you like how all my stories have snakes in them? But for some reason, just today there's two. But it was in one of those like huge glass like cages. I don't know why anyone would want one, but this person had a huge python. And she told him, with the first day she walked in for the listing appointment, she said, I can't list this house without a lid on that cage. And he's like, oh, this snake is so old and lazy, it doesn't go anywhere, it's fine. She's like, no, I can't list this property, it's a python, unless you cover this thing up. So she lists the property. He says, okay. First day she goes in to show it, and it was one of those houses in Florida where you walk in and there's like big glass doors, and there was a big drape rod over it with drapes. And she sees this thing, and it's like curled up on the drapery rod. And she's like, shuts the door, leaves, calls the seller and says, I'm sorry, like, we had this conversation. You can't, this is such a danger. I'm not listing this house till you get rid of the snake. So she takes it off the market. A couple months later, he calls her back. He's like, okay, the snake's gone. I'm ready to list. So she's like, okay. She finds out that he's not exactly sure where the snake went, but it's gone. Okay. That's the story. This is a long time ago, but this is straight from my mother-in-law to me. So she lists the house. She sells it to this family. They have 3 small kids, and the lady is pregnant. Sells the house to this family. Fast forward 9 months later, she gets a call from the agent of the family that bought the house, who knew about this snake somehow. I don't know if they were the people that originally looked at it or what, but they knew about the snake. We found the snake, they said. This gigantic python, which is now at the Parrot Jungle in Miami, curled up in the nursery, on the shelf in the nursery. And my mother-in-law was like, are you kidding me? And they said, I guess snakes like that, like, if it probably, because there's not basements there, it probably got into the attic. And maybe when they went to pull out like Christmas stuff or whatever, made its way out. It was literally in the nursery, this snake, this gigantic like python. And they got it out. And so I'd say that is not fabulous whatsoever. That is completely scandalous. But first of all the what ifs, what could have happened to this poor child, or the family, or just everything from just that, like the sad part, to like the business side of like the legal issues that could have occurred. But again, it's just, yeah, there's always something in real estate to deal with and figure out, and a communication at the end of the day. So do you guys have any questions before we wrap up? Now that you're terrified? Oh my gosh. Well, thank you guys so much for sitting down and talking about negotiations. It's always changing. But if you guys ever need anything, I'm always here. You can always call.
Thank you.
You're the best. Thank you,
Thanks.
Kelly.
Thanks, guys. Bye. Amy, do you